The unexpected arrival. The emergency klaxons of the starship Phoenix screamed their final warning as Commander Zane Blackwood fought to keep his vessel from becoming a crater on the alien world below. Sparks cascaded from overhead panels while the smell of burning circuits filled the cramped cockpit. His knuckles were white against the control yoke as he wrestled with dying engines and a navigation system that had given up 3 minutes ago. "Come on, you stubborn piece of junk!" Zane muttered through gritted teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. The Phoenix had been his home for the past 5 years, carrying him through 17 different star systems as a freelance explorer and occasional smuggler. She wasn't much to look at, but she'd never let him down. Until now. The surface of Vorthak Prime rushed up to meet him with alarming speed. Through the cracked viewport, he could see towering spires of crystalline architecture that seemed to pulse with an inner light. The planet's twin suns cast everything in shades of amber and gold, creating an almost dreamlike quality to the landscape below. It would have been beautiful if he wasn't about to crash into it. With a bone-jarring impact that rattled his teeth, the Phoenix skidded across what appeared to be a ceremonial plaza, sending chunks of polished stone flying in all directions. The ship groaned and shuddered before finally coming to rest against an ornate fountain that exploded in a shower of luminescent water. Zane sat in the sudden silence, breathing hard and checking himself for injuries. A few bruises and a cut on his forehead, but nothing serious. He was alive, which was more than he'd expected 30 seconds ago. The question now was whether he'd stay that way. As he worked to extract himself from the wreckage of his control panel, Zane became aware of voices outside the ship. They were speaking in a language he didn't recognize, but the tone was unmistakably urgent and angry. He'd apparently crashed into something important. The Phoenix's main hatch was stuck, forcing him to kick it open with a screech of twisted metal. As soon as he stepped outside, Zane found himself surrounded by a dozen beings unlike anything he'd ever seen. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with sleek, elongated limbs and skin that shimmered with an oily, iridescent quality. Their faces were angular and sharp, with large, multifaceted eyes that seemed to catalog his every movement. These had to be the Vorthak, the mysterious species that controlled this sector of space. Humanity had been trying to establish contact with them for decades, but they'd remained stubbornly isolationist. Now Zane was getting a closer look than anyone had ever managed, and he wasn't sure that was a good thing. The Vorthak warriors wore armor that looked like it had been grown rather than forged, flowing seamlessly with their natural body lines. They carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy, all pointed directly at him. One of them, distinguished by additional crystalline growths along his skull, stepped forward and spoke in accented but clear English. "Human vessel, you have violated the sacred space during the Ascension trials. This transgression demands immediate judgment." Zane raised his hand slowly, showing he was unarmed. "Look, I'm sorry about the dramatic entrance. My ship malfunctioned and I couldn't control where I landed. If there's damage, I'm willing to make restitution." The lead warrior's multifaceted eyes shifted color from deep blue to angry orange. "Restitution? You speak of payment when you have desecrated the circle of trials? The princess herself must decide your fate." Before Zane could ask what exactly he'd stumbled into, the crowd of Vorthak parted to reveal a figure that made his breath catch in his throat. She moved with fluid grace, her form more delicate than the warriors surrounding her, but no less imposing. Her skin held a softer luminescence, like moonlight on water, and intricate patterns of bioluminescent markings traced elegant spirals along her arms and neck. Princess Zyla of the Vorthak Empire had heard about the crash from 3 different sources before she'd finished her morning meditation. A human ship, they said, fallen from the sky like a burning star to land in the sacred plaza. It was unprecedented, impossible, and according to the old laws, punishable by immediate execution. But as she approached the wreckage and saw the human standing defiantly among her guards, something unexpected stirred in her chest. He was shorter, Then her people, broader in build, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of deep space. There was something in his posture, a quiet strength that spoke of someone who'd faced danger before and survived. "You are the pilot of this vessel?" she asked, her voice carrying the authority of royalty, but tinged with curiosity. Zane met her, gaze without flinching. "Commander Zane Blackwood, at your service, Your Highness. Though I have to say, the landing could have gone better." A ripple of shocked whispers went through the assembled Vorthak. No one spoke to the princess with such casual disrespect. Xyla herself felt her primary heart skip a beat, though whether from anger or something else entirely she couldn't say. "You make light of sacrilege, human. The circle of trials has been blessed by 7 generations of my ancestors. Your metal beast has shattered stones that were laid by my great-grandmother's own hands." Zane looked around at the damaged plaza, genuinely regretful. "I'm sorry. I really am. But sometimes the universe has its own plans, and we just have to roll with them." Elder Korath, the high priest of the trials and Xyla's chief advisor, stepped forward with obvious displeasure. His ceremonial robes rustled as he moved, and the bone chimes woven into his crest made soft clicking sounds. "Princess, the law is clear. This contamination must be cleansed with the intruder's blood." Xyla studied the human more carefully. There was something about him that defied her expectations. The stories told of humans as a weak, short-lived species prone to violence and chaos. But this one stood calmly in the face of death, more concerned, with apologizing for accidental damage than pleading for his life. "The Ascension trials begin at sunset," she said slowly, an idea forming in her mind. "They are meant to test the worthiness of those who would serve our empire." Korath's eyes widened in alarm. "Princess, surely you don't mean to suggest—" "I mean to offer this human a choice," Xyla interrupted, her voice carrying final authority. "Submit to judgment now and face execution for sacrilege, or prove your worth in the trials. Success earns you not just your life, but safe passage through our space for your entire species. Failure—" She let the word hang in the air. Zane felt the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about his own survival anymore. If he understood correctly, the princess was offering him a chance to open diplomatic relations between humanity and the Vorthak Empire. It was an opportunity that could change the course of galactic history. "What exactly do these trials involve?" he asked. Elder Korath's voice dripped with disdain. 3 challenges, each designed to test a different aspect of worthiness. Physical prowess, mental acuity, and emotional resonance with our ways. Many Vorthak warriors fail. What chance does a human have? Zane smiled, and Xyla found herself surprised by how the expression transformed his face. "Well, when you put it like that, how can I resist? I accept your challenge, Princess." The crowd erupted in shocked conversations, but Xyla raised a hand for silence. She was taking an enormous risk. If the human failed, it would be seen as proof of her poor judgment. If he succeeded, well, that would bring its own complications. "Very well. You have until sunset to prepare. The trials will test everything. You are Commander Blackwood. I suggest you use the time wisely." As the Vorthak began to disperse, making preparations for the unprecedented trial of a human, Xyla lingered for a moment. There was something about this strange being that intrigued her, something that whispered of possibilities she'd never considered. "Princess," Zane called softly as she turned to leave. "Thank you for the chance." She looked back at him, her bioluminescent, patterns shifting to colors he couldn't interpret. "Don't thank me yet, human. The trials have claimed the lives of better warriors than you." But as she walked away, Xyla couldn't shake the feeling that this human might be different from everything she'd been taught to expect. And deep in her primary heart, She found herself hoping he would prove her right. The twin suns continued their slow arc across the alien sky, marking the hours until a test that would determine not just one man's fate, but potentially the future. Relationship between two species. And in the growing shadows of the crystal spires, both human and alien began to prepare for a challenge that would change them both forever. The trial of hearts and minds. The chambers they gave Zane to prepare were more luxurious than anything he'd experienced in years of deep space travel. Walls of living crystal pulsed gently with warm light, and the floor seemed to adjust its firmness to match his footsteps. A selection of foods had been provided, though he couldn't identify half of them. Some glowed softly, others seemed to shift color as he watched. He was examining what looked like a fruit made of liquid starlight when a soft chime announced a visitor. The door dissolved rather than opening, revealing Princess Zyla. She had changed from her formal robes into something simpler, though no less elegant. The bioluminescent patterns on her skin were dimmer now, creating an almost intimate atmosphere. "I thought you might have questions about what you're facing," she said, stepping into the room. The door reformed behind her, sealing them in privacy. Zane set down the strange fruit and studied her face. "I get the feeling you're taking a big risk by being here." "Everything about today is a risk," Zyla admitted. "But perhaps that's what makes it interesting." She moved to the window that looked out over the city. "Tell me, Commander Blackwood, what do you know about my people?" "Not much," Zane said honestly. "Humanity has been trying to establish contact for decades, but the Vorthak Empire has remained closed to outsiders. We know you're technologically advanced, that you control a significant portion of this sector, and that you're selective about who you interact with." Zyla's patterns shifted to what he was beginning to recognize as amusement. Selective? A diplomatic way to say we consider most species beneath our notice. And humans fall into that category? She turned from the window to face him directly. "Until today, yes. We saw your species as young, chaotic, destructive, short-lived creatures who fought among themselves and consumed resources without thought for the future." Zane winced. To be fair, that description isn't entirely wrong. "No," she agreed, "but it's also incomplete. Your crash landing today, another species would have either died in the impact or begged for mercy. You stood up, took responsibility, and accepted an impossible challenge to protect your people's future. That suggests there's more to humanity than our reports indicated." She moved closer, and Zane caught a scent like ozone and night-blooming flowers. "The trials begin in 2 hours. The first test is combat, but not as you might expect. You won't face a warrior in direct battle." "Then what?" "You'll face the Sentinel," she said quietly. "It's an ancient construct, a guardian that tests not just strength but adaptability and intelligence. Many of our finest warriors have fallen to it because they tried to overpower it directly." Zane absorbed this information. "And you're telling me this because I want to see what a human can do when given a fair chance." Her eyes, large and multifaceted, seemed to look directly into his soul. "And because I find myself curious about you, Commander Blackwood." Before he could respond, she continued with the briefing. "The second trial tests mental acuity through the maze of echoes. It's not just about finding your way through a physical space, but about understanding the connections between thought, memory, and reality. The maze responds to your mind, creating obstacles based on your fears and doubts." "Sounds cheerful," Zane muttered. "The third trial?" Zyla hesitated, her patterns shifting to colors he couldn't read. "The third requires emotional resonance. You must demonstrate understanding of our culture, our values, our way of seeing the universe. It's intimate. More than one candidate has been driven mad by the experience." Zane was quiet for a moment, processing everything she'd told him. "Why are you helping me? If I succeed, it changes everything between our species. That has to make some of your people nervous." Zyla moved to a crystalline shelf and picked up what looked like a miniature star trapped in glass. "My father, the Emperor, has been ill for many cycles. Soon, I will inherit the throne. I've spent my life preparing to rule an empire that sees itself as superior to all others. But lately, I've wondered, what if we're wrong? What if isolation has made us weak instead of strong?" She set the star glass down and looked at him directly. "Your arrival today feels like a sign, a chance, to test not just your worth but our assumptions about the universe." The twin suns were setting when they led Zane to the trial arena. It was a massive circular space carved from living rock, with tiers of seating rising up into shadows. Thousands of Vorthak had gathered to witness this unprecedented event. There, excited whispers created a sound like wind through crystal chimes. Elder Korath stood at the center of the arena, his ceremonial staff glowing with inner fire. "By ancient law and sacred tradition, we begin the trial of worthiness. The human known as Zane Blackwood will face 3 challenges. Success in all 3 earns him and his species safe passage through our realm. Failure." He let the word echo. In the vast space, Zane walked onto the arena floor, very aware of the thousands of alien eyes watching his every move. In the royal box, Princess Zyla sat rigidly upright, her face carefully neutral, but her patterns betraying her nervousness. The first challenge materialized in the center of the arena. The Sentinel was unlike anything Zane had ever seen. It stood 12 feet tall, with a body that seemed to be made of flowing liquid metal. Its form constantly shifted, sometimes humanoid, sometimes more abstract. Energy crackled around it like contained lightning. "First trial," Korath announced. "Face the Sentinel. Prove your physical worth." The construct moved with impossible speed, launching itself at Zane with arms that had become blade-like extensions. He dove to the side, rolling across the stone floor as the impact crater showed where he'd been standing. The crowd gasped as he came up running, staying ahead of the creature's attacks through pure mobility. Zyla had warned him that trying to overpower the Sentinel directly was a mistake. As he watched its movements, he began to understand why. Every time it attacked, it seemed to learn and adapt. Its speed increased, its accuracy improved, and its form shifted to counter whatever strategy he employed. But adaptation worked both ways. Zane led the Sentinel in a wide circle around the arena, staying just ahead of its reaching claws. He was looking for patterns, weaknesses, anything he could exploit. The creature was fast and strong, but it was also predictable in its aggression. When the Sentinel lunged again, Zane didn't dodge to the side. Instead, he dropped and rolled directly under it, coming up behind as it crashed into the arena wall. In that moment of recovery, he saw what he'd been looking for. There was a core of brighter energy at the center of its shifting form, like a heart made of light. The next time it attacked, Zane was ready. He feinted left, then dove right, as the creature committed to its strike. His hand found a loose piece of stone from the earlier impact, and as the Sentinel turned to face him, he hurled it with perfect accuracy at the energy core. The rock passed harmlessly through the liquid metal body, but when it struck the core, the entire construct froze. For a moment, the arena was silent. Then the Sentinel began to dissolve, its form breaking apart into wisps of energy that faded into nothing. The crowd erupted in surprise, chittering and clicking sounds. Many had never seen the Sentinel defeated so quickly, or with so little apparent effort. "First trial completed," Korath announced, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely pleased. "Prepare for the maze of echoes." The arena floor began to shift and change, walls of crystalline material rising from the stone. Within moments, Zane found himself standing at the entrance to a labyrinth that stretched up into darkness above him. The walls seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat, and he could hear whispers echoing from the depths. "Second trial," Korath's voice boomed from above. "Navigate the maze of echoes. Find the chamber of truth at its heart. But beware, the maze sees into your mind and will use what it finds against you." Zane stepped into the labyrinth, and immediately the whispers grew louder. They spoke in voices he recognized, dredging up memories he'd tried to forget. His father's disappointment the day he'd left Earth, the friends he'd lost in the Centauri expedition, the woman he'd loved and abandoned, because he couldn't stay in one place long enough to build a life. The maze responded to his emotional state, walls shifting to block paths that had been clear moments before. Dead ends appeared where corridors should continue, and through it all, the whispers grew more insistent, more personal, more cutting. "You always run away." His father's voice echoed from the walls. "You can't commit to anything or anyone." "You killed us all," came the voice of Marcus Webb, his former crewmate. "Your decisions, your leadership. We trusted you, and you led us into the void." Zane stopped walking and closed his eyes. The voices were right about some things. He had run from commitments, had made mistakes that cost lives. But Zyla's words echoed in his memory. This trial wasn't just about finding a physical path. It was about understanding the connections between thought, memory, and reality. Instead of fighting the voices or trying to ignore them, he listened. Really listened. Yes, he'd made mistakes. Yes, he'd hurt people. But he'd also saved lives, explored unknown worlds, and pushed the boundaries of human knowledge. The maze was showing him his failures, but it couldn't negate his successes. "A man not perfect," he said aloud to the whispering walls. "But I'm here, and I'm trying to do better." The maze shuddered around him, and suddenly the path forward was clear. The chamber of truth lay ahead, a circular room filled with soft golden light. At its center sat a simple crystal that pulsed with inner fire. "Second trial completed," Korath announced, and Zane could hear the surprise in his voice. The final trial took place back in the main arena, but now the space had been transformed. The harsh stone had been covered with soft flowing materials in colors that shifted like aurora. Gentle music filled the air, and the scent of unknown flowers created an almost dreamlike atmosphere. Princess Zyla descended from the royal box to stand before him. She had changed again, now wearing robes that seemed to be made of captured starlight. Her bioluminescent patterns were brighter than he'd ever seen them, creating complex, beautiful designs across her skin. "The final trial," she said, her voice carrying throughout the arena. "Emotional resonance. You must understand not just our words, but our hearts, our hopes, our fears, our dreams for the future." She extended her hand toward him. "Will you share consciousness with me, human? Will you let me see who you truly are, while you see the truth of my people?" Zane looked at her outstretched hand, knowing that this was the moment that would determine everything. Not just his fate or even humanity's future relationship with the Vorthak Empire, but something deeper and more personal. "Yes," he said, and took her hand. The moment their skin touched, the universe exploded into sensation. Zane felt himself falling through layers of alien consciousness, experiencing emotions and concepts for which humans had no words. He saw the Vorthak Empire not as conquerors, but as gardeners, carefully tending the growth of younger species until they were ready for contact. He felt Zyla's loneliness, her burden of leadership, her desperate hope that there might be others in the universe who could understand the weight of responsibility, and she saw him in return. His wanderlust wasn't running away. It was reaching toward something greater. His inability to settle down wasn't fear of commitment. It was a drive to explore and discover that was fundamental to his nature. She felt his longing for connection, His deep love for his species despite their flaws, and his willingness to sacrifice everything for the chance to build bridges between worlds. When the connection ended, they were both breathing hard, staring into each other's eyes with new understanding. The arena had gone completely silent, thousands of Vorthak witnesses sensing that something profound had just occurred. "I understand now," Xyla whispered, though her words carried clearly in the hushed space. "Humanity isn't what we thought. You're not chaos. You're potential. Unlimited, terrifying, beautiful potential." Elder Korath stepped forward, his voice formal but shaken. "The trials are complete. The human has succeeded in all 3 challenges. By ancient law, his species has earned safe passage through our realm." But Xyla wasn't finished. She turned to address the crowd, her voice ringing with authority and conviction. "More than safe passage, I declare that humanity shall be offered full diplomatic relations with the Vorthak Empire. We have much to learn from each other." The crowd erupted in discussion, some voices raised in protest, others in excitement. But Zane only had eyes for the alien princess who had risked everything to give him a chance. "Thank you," he said quietly. She smiled, an expression he was learning to read despite the differences in their features. "Thank you, Commander Blackwood. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope," she said. "Hope that the universe is bigger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. And now, we get to explore it together." As the twin suns set over Vorthak Prime, painting the crystal city in shades of gold and amber, a new chapter began in the relationship between 2 species. It started with a crash landing and a desperate gamble, but it would grow into something neither human nor Vorthak had ever dreamed possible. And in the growing darkness, as celebrations began throughout the city, Zane and Xyla stood together and looked up at the stars, knowing that tomorrow would bring challenges and opportunities that would reshape the galaxy itself.